achieved.
So we're coming off an event that had a very rare scenario involving two different fights. For the first time in a while, we saw not one but two fights in the same card ended via disqualification. And in that fight, both fighters won very early in the fight, one much deeper into the matchup, were at least behind. They lost the majority of the exchanges. Diego Sanchez was absolutely behind. Brock Weaver was off to a rough start. Both fighters were hit with illegal strikes, and it resulted in disqualifications with both men getting their hand raised. And some people have criticized Diego heavily, not so much Weaver because the fight was so new and early on, but a lot of people have criticized Diego for taking what they were quoting, quote-unquote, the easy way out in a fight that he was largely dominated in, a fight I got very much wrong. And then he gets his hand raised. And, he took a nasty gash. Some people are pointing out that gash came from a legal strike, and that the second one potentially hit some of his chest, maybe wasn't nearly as bad as everyone's making it out to be. But the fact of the matter is, it was an illegal blow. Michal Pereira just hit him with something he shouldn't have hit him with. And, you know what, had Diego continued, he probably gets finished. He was in rough shape. And the fight I want to point to is the Stefan Struve-Ben Rothwell matchup recently. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Struve got hit multiple times with low blows. And I think Rothwell had some points taken, and we saw in that matchup, and I believe, I can't remember who it was either Mark Goddard or Dan Murgliata, I believe. I'm hoping I'm right. Kind of convinced Struve to continue in a fight that he was winning, and had he gone to decision, he probably gets his hand raised. But he convinces him to continue. He suggests that he should continue. Like, he wasn't persistent, but he suggested he should continue. And Struve was compromised and absolutely got finished and lost the matchup. Where there's, just cause had Struve said, he's kicked me in the nuts 2-3 times. I can't continue. Those are legal fouls. It's a DQ. It's a disqualification. It should be over. I like what the referees did in these fights. You hit someone with a legal foul that compromises their ability to continue. It's an illegal blow to a downed opponent or multiple low blows. The fight's over because there are lasting impacts. And as we saw in the Struve-Rothwell matchup, Struve was compromised and lost the matchup as a result. Rothwell, and I benefited from it because I had Rothwell, like I had Sanchez, like I had Weaver. Rothwell should have been DQ'd. And Struve should have got the win in that fight and continued forward. Instead, he got finished. He opted to continue, was clearly not the same fighter, and got finished. So I don't mind Sanchez taking that route and saying, look, he hit me with some illegal blows. I'm taking the disqualification. Why not? Live to fight another day, avoid any further damage, and get a W in the meantime. That's what it comes down to. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we are breaking in the upcoming UFC Fight Night 168 event, which will go down on February 22nd or 23rd, depending on what part of the world you are in Auckland, New Zealand. I'll be giving you my 6 main card predictions on this episode of the show. My preliminary picks, as per usual, will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. I apologize, as my show is coming to you much later than normal. Usually I have it up by Wednesday, or early Wednesday at the latest. Now I'm going to have it up later. It's just been a very busy week. Now, I'm coming off an event where I went 8-5, but I lost the main event. The main event was kind of had I won the main event, we would have been in good shape and walked away with some, decent winnings. Instead, Corey Anderson gets knocked out, and we don't return a profit in either bet pack, coming close in the HBC and, of course, not in the CBC. But, of course, Anderson was the crux of that as one of my gold picks. Just not a great night, not happy about it, so we need to rebound here. We got to get going. It's been a little bit of tough sledding recently in the last 2 shows after a good stretch prior to that. My bet packs will be for sale for $15. If you're interested, again, I just sold it greatly. So, again, like I've said in the past, if you're having a lot of success on your own or using another individual's predictions or betting information, by all means, continue to do it. It's a great way. Just keep doing what works. If you need to change it up, maybe look into my stuff, maybe look into someone else's. Either way, just as long as we're all crushing the books, that's all it comes down to. Check me out on Twitter at KO_predictions. Make sure if you're new to my channel, you like and subscribe. Like my video, subscribe to the channel, and all that fun stuff in between. On that note, I've done a lot of rambling here. Let's get to our first main card prediction. Fight number 1 of the main card opens up in the UFC's featherweight division as the controversial Zubaira Tukhugov 18-4-1 takes on the 17-2 Kevin Aguilar. This fight stands to be a very good matchup with a lot of entertaining exchanges. Aguilar started his UFC run 2-0 and had won 9 consecutive fights prior to losing to a matchup losing to Dan Ige in a decision, and a pretty underwhelming performance by Aguilar. But again, the Ige is showing how good and how talented he is. For Tukhugov, he had won 9 consecutive fights as well. He had a split decision loss to Renato Moicano and then took 3 years off. A lot of issues involved, including the brawl situation with Khabib and Conor involved there. And then he came back and fought to a split draw against the debuting Leron Murphy. Now for Tukhugov, he's 1 inch taller, but Aguilar will have a sizable 5-inch reach advantage, and he's actually Aguilar is the older fighter by 3 years. Now we've seen, looking at Aguilar first, Kevin's a pretty solid striker with respectable power, 10 wins by knockout. He's put up some good numbers against Rick Glenn, who's a veteran fighter in his own right, and had decent numbers against Enrique Barzola as well. Unfortunately, against Ige, he just fell flat. He landed just 33 significant strikes. Ige outlanded him over 2-1 and just put him away. And it was just, Ige worked harder in that fight, just was more active, and that's just what it came down to. It just wasn't a great performance from Aguilar. Now, looking at Tukhugov, the big knock on him, and I had him to lose to Murphy in his last fight, the big knock on him is just a lack of volume or urgency. When you look at his stats, he routinely lands between 20 and 40 significant strikes. That's not a lot, especially even for a fighter who's been very successful. That's not a ton. Now, where he does put volume up, and the reason he's able to remain competitive and win some matchups that are close, is he has some solid takedown numbers. Against Murphy, most recently, he landed 6. Against Moicano, who's a very good grappler in his own right, he landed 3. In his debut, he also put up 3. So he's able to land those takedowns and score some points that way. But it's concerning when you see the Murphy fight, 6 takedowns, but not a lot of strikes overall. He's just not able to work that ground and pound. Now, when you look at what Kevin Aguilar has done, he's faced some guys who want to take him down. When he fought Enrique Barzola, a very good ground fighter who's routinely defeated guys on the basis of his wrestling, Barzola shot 8 times on Aguilar, and Aguilar shot him down all 8 times. Rick Glenn has shown he can work on the mat as well, 0 for 4 on takedown attempts, and even Ige, who's a very good grappler, landed just 1 of 4 attempts. The big question is, if Aguilar can replicate those numbers, can he stay vertical? Can he work a more aggressive striking offense than we saw against Ige, and then what we saw from what Tukhugov has normally offered his opposition? Again, Aguilar's performance against Ige just left a lot to be desired. Left a bad taste in our mouth. But again, the Ige loss has aged very well. You know, him beating Mirsad Bektik, which was a very good performance, is showing that Ige is a bigger factor in this division than we realize, and is in a better spot than many people realize, and that was a tougher fight than most gave him credit for. If Aguilar can stay vertical and or get back to his feet, I think he's in a good spot here against Tukhugov. Tukhugov tends to slow down just a little bit as fights progress. He gets a little tired. He gets a little worn out. And if he's not making those early takedowns count for a lot, and Aguilar's having success on the feet, doing damage and just outworking him, that's going to be a concern for the Russian. Tukhugov normally fights close bouts against less capable strikers than Aguilar. I think Aguilar has the edge over some of the guys he's fought and defeated. Aguilar, look for him to go out, put some solid volume together, sprawl his way over some takedowns, maybe spend some time on his back, and eventually get in a position to just really outwork Tukhugov. This is going to be a close fight, I think, but my prediction is Kevin Aguilar to defeat Zubaira Tukhugov by decision. Fight number 2 in the main card stands to be a very good matchup that a lot of people aren't going to anticipate, or at least a lot of people who maybe aren't familiar with these individuals. Nonetheless, we are in the UFC's lightweight division as the 14-2 Magomed Mustafaev takes on the 7-1 Brad Quake Riddell, or Riddell. I missed which way they pronounce it. I heard it both ways, actually, which is kind of confusing. Now, for Mustafaev, he's 4-1 in the UFC. He's only lost to Kevin Lee. And he's finished all 4 of his wins, too, so fairly impressive run to date. For Riddell, he has won his debut against Jamie Malarkey in a very fun, entertaining back-and-forth matchup. He has won 4 in a row overall, but this is a big step up in competition for Riddell. And, of course, obviously, he's the home fighter here, so that's huge for him. For Mags, he's 1 inch taller. Same reach, though, and Riddell is the younger fighter by 3 years. Now, Mustafaev fought Kevin Lee in 2016. And lost that matchup, which kind of derailed him a little bit. And then he took 2.5 years off. He's out of the action for 2.5 years, which is fairly significant. This will be a much better turnaround for him coming back into this fight. When you look at his record, he has finished all 15 of his opponents, 11 of which coming by knockout, 10 in the opening round. And he's never gone to the third round. 1 and 2 rounds, that's it. So that could be tested here against a fairly durable opponent. Mustafaev can go to the floor if he wants, or he can keep it standing. He does a pretty decent job of attacking his opponent's body, along with some hard low kicks, which is a tool that I love and is becoming more and more predominant in fighters' repertoires. Now, in his last fight, he landed a beautiful spinning wheel kick that put his opponent down, led to the finish. And again, he has a lot of techniques that are unorthodox and come out of nowhere and really are difficult to defend against because you're not anticipating them. And if you do anticipate them or look for them, some of the more conventional stuff, like his jab, like his low kicks, will score and create problems. He has a tendency to get a little bit wild and over-aggressive, but then he did look more measured in his last fight against a very good kickboxer in Fiziev. If I say his name incorrectly, I apologize. Now, Riddell will be the fan favorite here coming fighting in New Zealand. He trains alongside Israel Adesanya, so a lot of momentum there, and he comes from a kickboxing background, so he's an adept striker who will be open for a striking matchup here. Not surprisingly, 5 of his 7 wins have come by knockout, 3 in round number 1, but Also, he has one career loss by submission, which is not striking for a career striker. Now, he demonstrated decent takedown defense against Malarkey. He stopped he gave up 3 of 15 takedown attempts. He spent some time on his back, but he did a decent job overall. It's 12 takedown attempts defended. I think that'll be tested here as Mustafaev has shown he can work on the ground. Even though I don't think he's officially completed a takedown, he has spent some time on the mat. We actually did see Riddell go offensive with his takedowns, landing a couple takedowns as well. And again, he could do that to get Mustafaev off of his game plan. That's certainly something that's in his repertoire. He showed some good urgency once he gained separation in his last fight, which is something I like to see out of a fighter who is a striking-based fighter who is going to be engaged in a grappling attack at some point. I liked his toughness. He was very tough. He was very durable. He really poured it on at the end and cemented a fight that was very demanding and a debut matchup that was close at times, and I was impressed with what he showed me. Unfortunately, it's difficult to put too much faith into that because it was one fight, it was a debut scenario, and he was stepping up. Riddell took a lot of damage in that matchup. His defense didn't look amazing, and he's facing a more dangerous and unorthodox striker here, which could create further issue. It's also worth noting that Magomed was a massive betting favorite, and the line has switched tremendously, which tells us we're getting some huge value here. I think he'll trade with him early, look for those opportunities, and eventually he'll land something significant and continue that stretch. So my prediction is Magomed Mustafaev, my apologies, to defeat Brad Riddell by TKO. Up next, we're in the UFC's heavyweight division as the 16-6-1 Marcos Rogerio de Lima takes on the 7-2 Ben Sosoli in what should be a fairly interesting scrap. At least it should be an action fight, I would think. Sosoli's had back-to-back no contest, which is very odd to see, including the Greg Hardy no contest, a fight he lost, but Hardy took a puffer on the stool, and as a result, the fight was ruled a no contest after the fact. Prior to those back-to-back issues, Sosoli had won 4 consecutive. Now, De Lima's coming off a submission loss to Stefan Struve. He has alternated wins and losses over his last 8 appearances. The Brazilian has been out for a year, so he's taking a little bit of time away. He is 4 inches taller than Sosoli, a 3-inch reach advantage. Sosoli should come in 10 to 12 pounds heavier and is 4 years younger. And it's worth noting De Lima traditionally has fought at light heavyweight, but he seems like he's just a guy who needs to go up and has gone up recently, and that's a good move for him. Now, Rogerio is an absolute killer. 11 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission, 11 of 16 victories by first-round finish. Very impressive. Until his recent victory, he's had limited success in long fights. Tends to slow down a little bit. He can be taken down. He's vulnerable to submissions. 4 of his 6 losses coming by tap-out. So he's not a fighter who's going to be a racehorse and just outwork you from the duration, but he will fucking batter you for as long as he possibly can. Now, for Sosoli, 6 wins by knockout, 1 and 2 in decisions. 5 first-round wins, but he has gone a full 5 rounds on one occasion, so it's not like he's a guy who's also going to be a gas bag and be done after 5 minutes of fighting. Now, Sosoli has power, but again, in the Hardy fight against a longer, larger man, he really struggled to deploy it, didn't land a lot, didn't really mix his offense up, and he landed a few strikes here or there, but it just wasn't enough. Now, for De Lima, he is absolutely the more talented striker, a vicious Muay Thai fighter, but his gas tank does create some issues if that becomes a problem. Now, Sosoli's a bit of a brawler. He's a tough dude. But he does not want to go toe-to-toe with De Lima, who throws big power in his leg kicks and his body kicks and his hands. He's just going to go in there and absolutely murk you if you allow him to tee off. It's also worth noting that De Lima is a good threat on the mat. He's got big ground and pound, especially if he sprawls and brawls his way from out of a takedown. He can do some serious damage. And he's got a pretty nasty guillotine choke if you shoot in haphazardly and he catches you. Now, Sosoli doesn't present the physical issues that De Lima has had fighting in this division. He's had to overcome some taller guys, some longer guys. In fact, Lima's going to have those advantages in this fight. And that's going to be massive for him. He's going to enjoy that scenario where he doesn't have to worry about getting inside a reach of 5 or 6 inches difference. He's going to have some success there. I don't think Ben Sosoli has the grappling needed to replicate the issues that De Lima has had previously. Again, all 4 of his UFC losses have come by submission. Sosoli will be motivated by fighting in his home region, his home territory, but I don't think that'll be enough here. I think unless Sosoli catches him with a big shot, I think De Lima is just going to be... I could see Sosoli finding success if he can get this fight deep into round 2 and round 3 and make it really demanding. But I think he's going to take a lot of damage in the process, and unless De Lima has a complete collapse in those later stages and isn't able to get him out of there, I think De Lima is going to chop him down with the leg kicks, throw those big power hooks, go to work on the body, and just smash Ben Sosoli in a way that, again, people are overvaluing Greg Hardy a little bit. I think De Lima capitalizes on Ben Soli's willingness to take damage, and my prediction is Rogerio de Lima to defeat Sosoli by TKO. Fight number 4 in the main card takes place in the women's strawweight division as former title challenger Karolina Kowalkiewicz, with a current record of 12-5-0, takes on the rising Chinese contender 11-1 Xiaonan. Again, I pronounce her name wrong routinely. Xiaonan, again, 11-1 and on a winning streak. Yes, for Karolina Kowalkiewicz, she's not been the same fighter since her title fight loss. She's gone 2-5 in that stretch. She was submitted by Claudia Gadelha, split decision winner for Elise Herrig, very close fight, knocked out in one of the most vicious women's knockouts, one of the most vicious knockouts you'll ever see when she fought Jessica Andrade, and dropped the poor decisions against both Michelle Waterson and Alexa Grasso. For Xiaonan, she's 4-0 in the UFC. Most recently defeated Angela Hill, which is no easy feat. She did that at UFC 238 in her first fight in the United States, came out and put on a good performance. Jan's 2 inches taller. Karolina will have a 1-inch reach advantage, and the Chinese fighter is 4 years younger. Now, for Xiaonan, she's a pretty aggressive striker. She pushes a strong pace over 4 UFC bouts. She has landed 96 strikes, 71, 150, and 94. So 71, when that's your low point in 4 fights, you're doing pretty well. Her defense isn't amazing. She does give up a lot of offense, averaging 63.25 strikes per fight. But again, when you compare that to what she lands, she's in a good spot. And it hasn't really been an issue yet at giving up too much. She pushes a solid pace. She throws in some nice leg kicks to the legs and to the body, and she just keeps engaging, which is what we want to see. She will look for the periodic takedown, but it was more of a factor in her regional scene. She's been more of a striker here in the UFC, and she's starting to incorporate it as much as possible. Now, when you look at Karolina, even at her best, she was a bit of a slow starter. She routinely would drop the opening round. You look back to the Rose fight. Rose was winning round 1, and it was off to a good start in round 2. Karolina started doing damage in the clinch, took over round 2, won that, and then got the 3rd round. And that was big. But Karolina, again, at her best, gets off to a slow start and then rallies. Unfortunately, she hasn't been able to rally recently. She just hasn't been able to find her stride. Her volume is not there. Her clinch work is not there. Her range striking isn't there. She's getting a lot of second best. Against Alexa Grasso, she got battered by Grasso's power. Karolina doesn't hit. She's not a pillow puncher by any stretch of imagination, but she's going to go toe-to-toe with power. She's going to get the worst of it on a lot of occasions. And Grasso did a lot of damage with her low kicks and really busted her up. And Karolina's been wearing that damage, and that's not a good look with the judges, where your face starts to get battered, your body language is suggesting you're just on the losing end of it, and she just has a lot of issues rallying. Now, when she fought Jodie Escobar, she put up some big numbers. The Herring fight, both fighters, Herring fight were both plus 120, which is huge. But again, it just seems like the Jessica Andrade loss, which came after, really took her soul, took her willingness to compete. And again, she could be on her way out of the UFC here, especially with a loss. It seems like she's just moved past it. She is closing in on 35, which is going to be older for the women's division. That's definitely something worth noting here. And she got a lot of mileage. She's fought quite a few fights as well. For Carolina, I think she's going to struggle here to match the physicality and volume of her opponent. She's not going to be able to put up the numbers. She's going to take more damage as well. And when those two scenarios aren't working out for you, and Carolina doesn't exactly have an amazing ground game that she can fall back on and change the complexion of a fight, I think that's going to be an issue. And my prediction is Xiaonan to defeat Karolina Kowalkiewicz by decision. Finally, we move to the co-main event of the evening in the UFC's light heavyweight division as the 10-1 Jimmy Crute takes on the 14-3 Michal Oleksiejczuk. And again, I'm probably getting these wrong, but hey, I do my best. For Crute, he's coming off the first loss of his career, a submission defeat against Canadian-Latvian Misha Serkinov in a very entertaining one-round fight, back-and-forth matchup that drops him 2-1 in the promotion. For Oleksiejczuk, he lost as a favorite in the OSP fight, which we'll talk about one time. It was a huge fight. We'll talk about that in a moment. It's a massive fight for Oleksiejczuk and a disappointing loss. Prior to that, he had won all three of his UFC outings. One of them was a no contest against Roundtree. So, not still 2-0 prior to that loss. So, it was his first loss, the OSP loss, since 2015. So, certainly a guy who has had a good run. Physically, Crute is 2 inches taller. They will have the same reach, and Jimmy is the younger man by a year. Now, this fight stands to be a back-and-forth scrap, which is going to be all action, high-paced, demanding, and just generally speaking, it should be a violent matchup. For Oleksiejczuk, he likes to stand and trade. Now, he's very willing to take damage in the process, which isn't ideal, especially light heavyweight, but he's a younger guy who seems to have, ability to be fairly durable. And for the most part, it can be described as like out-toughing his opponent, absorbing their damage and wearing them out. He's 3-0 in decisions. 8 of his wins have come outside of the first round. He has 6 wins in the opening round, but again, in this division where a lot of guys can put you out with one shot, that's impressive. When he fought Roundtree, he survived the big shots early, overwhelmed him, broke him, and took a decision. Very impressive. Even though he lost via no contest, he still got the win from the functionality standpoint. Now, when he fought Antigulov was super aggressive, and Oleksiejczuk was backing up and cracked him, hurt him a multiple times, dropped him, and got him out of there. Against Gian Vellante was winning and being aggressive, tagged Gian with a good shot to the midsection, a body shot, put him down, and got him out of there as well. So good performances. Fast forward to the OSP matchup, and he was all over OSP. Hurt him in the first round. The first round, I don't know if it was 10-8, but it was close. Hurt him, knocked him down, had him in all kinds of trouble, had OSP completely rendered defensive, came out very strong in round 2, and all we saw was OSP landed a well-timed takedown and caught him in that, it's a Von Flue choke, but obviously OSP having executed it more, it's OSP's signature choke, a very unorthodox move that a lot of guys don't know how to recognize and defend against, and that put him to sleep, and that was the end of it. Honestly speaking, that was the only real offense OSP got off in almost the entire that fight, a takedown and an unorthodox submission. Now, Crute is a very raw fighter still with his offense. He's a little wild, a little less defensively oriented. It just slips at times and allows the fighters to get in there. Against Alvey, he was trading with Alvey before clipping him, so he certainly has power and getting, he got it to the floor, landed some ground and pound in that matchup, and certainly hurt him to get the finish. Against Craig, when he fought in that, I think it was his debut, he was arguably behind in that fight before getting the win late with a good submission, which was impressive. Again, potentially due to his reckless nature, some back and forth exchanges where he wound up on his back a couple times and just not in some good spots. Now, he's fighting at home or in his home region, which should be huge, but I don't know if that's enough here. Crute has gone beyond round 1 just 4 times in 11 fights. That's not amazing. And for Oleksiejczuk, for a fighter that pushes a crazy pace and can do it for 2 and 3 rounds, that just puts a glaring X on a scenario there and says, this is what we need to look at here. We've also seen Crute. He's willing to take damage. He can be hit, and he definitely, he will start to slow down, and that's not a good combination. Again, if you absorb damage, will slow down, and you're facing an opponent that will push the pace, that is not ideal. If Oleksiejczuk does get caught in a tough spot, if he didn't get caught in a tough spot against OSP, he's probably undefeated, and he's fighting a higher profile matchup here. I'm not discrediting Crute. I'm just saying he's in a different spot here. I think Crute will have his moments. It'll probably be a fun fight, but once he starts to slow down just a little bit, look for Oleksiejczuk, just keep pushing and backing him up. Oleksiejczuk has pretty much won the vast majority of the time he spent inside the cage. And I think he's going to pull away here. Oleksiejczuk either gets the finish with a one-shot knockout like he did against Antigulov or against Vellante, or it's death by accumulation, but I think he wears Crute out, and my prediction is Michal Oleksiejczuk to defeat Jimmy Crute by TKO. Finally, in the main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's light heavyweight division as Paul the Irish Dragon Felder, 17-4-0, takes on Dan the Hangman Hooker, 19-8-0. What a big fight. It's a great matchup here. It's a fight between, and the way we characterize this is these are ranked fighters, I believe, last time I checked. They're two incredibly dangerous lightweights that are not in immediate title contention, but they present a threat to the vast majority of fighters in the division. They're the type of fight that they do not want to match up in because they very well could lose, and a win here gets the winner of this a bigger matchup yet and a huge push forward. Now, this fight has some history. Felder went in and interviewed Hooker, and Hooker identified Felder as a fighter he wanted to fight. Felder reciprocated, and then they led to this. And then we had some online beef with Felder making a joke about Hooker's last name. I don't know if it's manufactured or not. Nonetheless, it's kind of a nice little build-up. Now, Felder comes into this having won back-to-back fights, a split decision against Edson Barboza, which was a little bit controversial, a decision win over James Vick. He lost a split decision against Platinum Mike Perry at welterweight on short notice. Overall, he's won 5 in a row in his natural lightweight divisions. That's huge. Now, for Hooker, he has won back-to-back against the aforementioned Vick and against Ally Quinta, very impressive win. And he has won 6 of 7, with his only loss, Edson Barboza. Now, Hooker 1 inch taller. He'll have a 5-inch reach advantage, though, and he is 6 years younger than Paul Felder. Now, as we said, there's some common opponents here. Both guys beat James Vick. Hooker got him out of there by impressive knockout. Felder went the distance with him. Felder's got one-on-one, most recently beating Barboza in their head-to-head, while Hooker got absolutely obliterated by Edson Barboza in that fight. Now, I would say the edge in overall strength of competition and strength of recent wins goes to Dan Hooker. Ally Quinta, big win. When you compare the recent, Ally Quinta, a big win for a big win for Felder against Barboza. Those kind of pair off. The Vick fights line up, obviously the same fighter. Then you got Gilbert Burns versus Charles Oliveira. Burns has been a little bit more of an effective fighter at lightweight, I would say, even though Oliveira more a natural featherweight. That's still a solid win on both sides of things. But then when you get into the depth, for Felder, it's been Stevie Ray, Alex Ricci, Berkman, and Cruikshank. And then you look at the guys that Hooker's been taking out, Miller, Diakase, and Pearson. So again, the edge goes to Hooker there, I'd say, in overall competition. It's also worth noting Hooker's fighting at home in New Zealand. He's a Kiwi. He's from New Zealand, and he is 5-1 in the UFC when fighting in New Zealand or Australia. That's massive. Conversely, Paul Felder's been an absolute road warrior. The guy is 4-1 when fighting outside the United States, inside the octagon. He's gone into Canada twice and beat 2 Canadians. He went into Scotland and beat Stevie Ray. He did lose to Francisco Trinaldo via cut TKO in Brazil. But he's never fought this part of the world, but nonetheless, he's shown he can fight under pressure in these diverse scenarios. It's also worth noting both fighters, they have flawed styles. They recently have attempted to correct those styles, but at least we can talk about them. For Hooker, he has been too passive, and at times he's allowed his opponents to land too much offense and dictate how things play out. And you look at his record, you say the guy's 0-3 in decisions in the UFC. That's tough. He's 2-5 overall in decisions, which indicates this is not just an uncommon scenario. Now, for Felder, he's had a lot of flashy offense, not enough function. He's been outworked in a lot of his fights. He has a subpar record in decisions in the UFC, 6-3 overall, 2-2 in splits, and 4-3 in decisions in the UFC. So the same thing, he's not blowing guys out of the doors either for an elite fight, or a guy who's wanting to be elite. So his decision record isn't amazing either. Now, Hooker was more aggressive against Ali Aquinta, trying to turn the tide here, and it absolutely worked. He moved forward. He utilized his jab and his reach very effectively. He mixed in some low ankle kicks, which I liked. He was not allowing his opponent to get comfortable, kept his back to the cage. That was beautiful. He forced Al to go to his wrestling. He sprawled out of it, used his length and his size, countered with some good elbow strikes, and really made him pay for those attempts. There have been some concerns over his cardio. He's never gone a full 5 rounds. He's 2-4 in 3-round fights in the UFC. He did slow down a little bit against Al, but still was more active, did more damage, and overall was a good performance. When Felder fought Vic, he threw a lot of rhythm changes at him. He was starting and stopping. He was trying to mix it up. He was trying to land more strikes, be more aggressive, more vicious, and just more effective with his techniques. It makes him harder to read when he is mixing in those starts and stops. He improved his, the impact of his offense overall, and I like that. Now, one thing with Felder, and which is concerning against a guy like Vic, who's a longer fighter, he is the only fighter in Vic's 5 UFC losses not to knock him out. In fact, Vic's been knocked out in 4 consecutive fights, and Felder was the only guy in that stretch not to knock him out, which is concerning. You'd say, where's Felder's killer instinct? Unable to get him out of there. Hooker knocked him out. Why didn't Felder? In Felder's last 3 fights, he's landed 55 to 56 significant strikes and gave up 60 to 62. In those fights, 2 of them were close splits. It's just he's not blowing guys out of the water. He's had the lung issue is also a concern, and it raises a question how he will fare here. Felder has fought 8 times where the differential in strikes was 10 or less. He was behind in 4 of them. And again, he has success in close fights, but again, when you're fighting in enemy territory against a very capable, very young, very aggressive fighter, can you fight that style? Can you be, shot for shot with a guy like this who's got a reach advantage on you? Can you do that and win a decision? I don't know. It's tough. I think the defensive edge lies with Felder. Hooker's a little more willing to take defense. Both fighters are very durable. We've seen that. The activity rate certainly favors Hooker. I'd say the power goes to Felder, but probably not. It's razor thin. They both hit very hard. The length obviously goes to Hooker. The grappling is a wash. It would be difficult, hard pressed to see either man pull off a dominant grappling. I think Hooker's the more adept to land a submission, but Felder probably is more likely to pick up some ground and pound success. And obviously home field advantage favors Hooker as well. I like Hooker to do damage here, be a little more active. He's motivated by fighting at home. I think he gets back in the win column, and my prediction is Dan Hooker to defeat Paul Felder by decision. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 168. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. I apologize, I sound a little bit rushed right now as I'm trying to get all this done. As time is ticking, we want to get on this card ASAP. It looks like a fun card. If you're interested in buying the bet pack, certainly consider investing. Follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. I think I've said enough. We've got a lot of fights coming up, so we're very much looking forward to all the action in the future. Don't miss it on this card, folks. Take care. I'll see you after the bell. Hi.